Okay, so we are at a point in the lecture where we're at something where it says ecological pyramids describe trophic levels. Look at that. That one didn't show up very well, did it? But it's okay, I know the slides anyway. I just have them to make sure that I remember what I'm supposed to talk about. So ecological pyramids describe trophic levels. What the heck does that mean? All right, so when you are an ecologist, you are studying these relationships that I mentioned to you. I said the interactions between species and their environment, plus there's one more component to it, the energy that is flowing through the system, right? So we had said energy flows through an ecosystem, whereas matter cycles within. So when we talk about the ecological pyramids describing trophic levels, we have to think about the flow of energy in these communities. And we had said a community is what? It's all of the species living within a defined area. And then we had said, well, we have different roles in that community: primary producers, primary consumers, secondary consumers, tertiary consumers, quaternary consumers in some cases. And so remember we were talking about the laws of thermodynamics, the laws of physics. Oh, you love that part, I know. No. Anyway, we were talking about the laws of thermodynamics. And I said the second law of thermodynamics states that with every energy transfer, there is a loss of energy to a very unuseful form, which we call entropy, and it's heat energy. And I made the comment that when you drive your car down the road, the engine gets really hot. And so some of the energy, rather than propelling your car, was lost as heat energy. It didn't do any work, it just is there. Well, you have the same thing. You have the same thing in the ecosystem. So it ends up, if we'd said, you have this sunlight coming down and it's being captured by all those photosynthetic fellas, the autotrophs, the self-feeders, that's another name for primary producers, and heterotrophs means other feeders, meaning they're feeding off of something else. Those are the consumers. So when we think of the autotrophs, the primary producers, they're capturing a certain amount of that energy, and some of it is lost as heat energy. But if you're an ecologist, you can go out into that community and you can harvest in small sections. Well, we'll say the goldenrod community, because I've had students do this in an ecology class. And what you can do is you can go out and randomly select 1 square meter plots in this giant field of goldenrod. And what you do is you measure off and you find your spot, and you collect all of the plant matter in that 1 meter by 1 meter square. You collect all of it, got a big bags of these things. You bring it back to the lab, and what you do is number one, you count how many individuals are in there, and then number two, you weigh it. Now the number of individuals will tell you how many plants there are in this field. You can do this with a few plots, so you do it with 3 or more locations in the field, and then you can calculate how many individuals are in that field, and it's amazing number. But if we think about the energy, what is the energy? Well, the energy from the plants, it takes the form of biomass. So you start out, you think of that little teeny tiny plant, and the sunlight allows it to get bigger, using CO2 and water, right? And so the biomass is stored energy from the sun. And so you can go out there, take these 1 square meter plots, and figure out what's the average biomass of the primary producers in that goldenrod field. And then so you say, however much, we'll say 5 pounds per square meter, and you've got 1,000 square meters. That's 5,000 pounds of goldenrod. So that's the energy in that ecosystem, in that 1,000 square meter ecosystem. But that's the primary producers. Now, there are things that eat that goldenrod. And so, but when they eat the goldenrod, only some of that energy from the goldenrod becomes the herbivore. And we'd said you lose a lot of it. You lose 90% of it. That's sort of the rule of thumb. So if we had 100 pounds, we'll just use 100 pounds of primary producer, and we lost 90% of it, that means the herbivores in that community would be 10 pounds. And then what about the secondary consumers, the things that are eating the deer? Well, in that, then you would say, well, you lose 90%, so they would be 1 pound. So if you had 100 pounds of producers, 10 pounds of primary consumers, 1 pound of secondary consumers, 1/10 of a pound of tertiary consumers. There is a 10-fold reduction in each level. And if you think of that, if you were to graph it, you'd have a big primary producer section, then a smaller primary consumer, and then a smaller secondary consumer, and then a very small tertiary consumer. It's a pyramid. It's a pyramid. That's what we're talking about. So that's why we say ecological pyramids describe trophic levels. So, and it's all because of that darn entropy, the second law of thermodynamics. Because there's a loss of energy, a very large loss of energy, with every energy transfer. Okay, so the slide, I want you to look at that one real carefully. Yeah, I know what's there. So what is actually there on the slide that comes next, it shows a pyramid on one side, and then next to it, you have the the decomposers. And if you look at those decomposers, they're big. They carry a lot of the energy in the community is in the form of those decomposers. So make sure you look at that. So we have a nice little pyramid when we talk about the producers and the consumers, and then you got the bar to the side, which is the decomposers. Okay. I'm going to stop here, and we're going to introduce some of the biogeochemical cycles. So we had said energy flows through the ecosystem and matter cycles. Okay, we're going to talk about that cycling next.